In this session, we will focus on bicep parameters. Parameters are the key to making your bicep templates dynamic, reusable, and adaptable to multiple environments. By using parameters, you can create one template and deploy it into multiple environments like development, test, and production without changing a single line of code. First thing first, what are parameters? Parameters are like inputs that you can pass into your bicep template at deployment. Instead of hard coding values like location, resource name, you can define them as parameters and pass the value in when you deploy. Why should you care about parameters? The key reason is flexibility. Parameters allow you to reuse the same bicep file in multiple environments like dev, test, and production without changing the file itself. Instead of hard coding names, location, or configuration, you can make them dynamic by passing them as inputs during deployment. This makes your templates flexible, reusable, and much more easier to maintain. How to declare a parameter? We usually declare parameter with the keyword param followed by the name of the parameter to define and the type of parameter. Then if you want to pass in default value, you now use equals to and define the value of the parameter. That this will be the default value which will stand when no other value is passed in to override the value. Bicep has five types of parameters. We have the string, usually used for text values like, say, resource groups, names, or location. We also have the integer, ideal for numerical values such as counts or sizes and things like that. We have the boolean, usually for true or false values, say like toggling features. We have the array for list of values like regions. We have objects, usually for group related properties, say for instance the name and location for a storage account. Here are some quick examples of parameters and types. Here we have the storage account name parameter, a string which represents the name of a storage account with a default value bicep series SA. We also have the instant count parameter, an integer type of parameter which represents the number of virtual machines to be provisioned with a default number of 3. We have the enable diagnostic parameter, a boolean which determines if a feature diagnostic is needed or not. The default value here is true, which will enable diagnostics. Otherwise, it is disabled by passing as false. We have the regions parameter, an array with the list of locations. Lastly, we have the storage account config parameter, an object which denotes the properties of a storage account to be deployed, making the configuration more structured. So here we have the name of the storage account as Bicep Series SA. We have the location to be deployed as West US 3. We have the SKU of the storage account as standard LRS. Here we have our simple template that is being hard coded and we want to transit this to use parameters. So we're going to start by just copying this code and pasting here. Then we'll start looking at how to make this better. The first thing I would like to replace here is the storage account name. Okay. For this, I will pass a parameter. The keyword is param, remember? And the storage account name is the one I want to use and is a string. So having declared this here, I'm now able to use this in place of this hard-coded value, which simply means that we can now be able to pass the name at deployment. Then this will allow us to be able to pass in for different environments. Similarly, let's do the same for the location. Pass on that parameter location, and is also a string. Okay, then I will be able to use this here as well. Please notice that hard-coded value are written in quotes, But for parameters, you don't have to write them in quotes. If not, they may as well be taken as, as a value rather than as a parameter. So this is the exact example, for instance. So let's have it as a parameter. Next one is probably the SKU. I will use the name storage account SKU to pass that one. Storage account SKU. And that will be a string as well. Then I can now take this to replace the SKU type. This will allow us to pass in different values for different environments. But this now takes us to another point. How do we pass in the values for parameters? Like we've seen previously, we can define a default value. That will be the first method here. So for these, let's pick one of these as an example. I'll be defining default value for the location. Since I'm deploying to a resource group, I want to as well pass the location of that resource group as the location of its deployment. So for that, I will pass in a function resource group, and I will pick that location to use. Okay, so this simply passes the location parameter as the location of the resource group. So I have defined the value for location. Another way of defining a value is passing key value pairs at deployment. Okay, so this as well will override any default value like this one that has been defined here. Okay, this will also override any default value that have been defined in the bicep file. So let's save this. Okay, then let's demo how we might pass in those values at deployment as key value pairs. Here we'll define the storage account name and the storage account SKU as key value pairs. So what will be the name? We can simply just copy this and paste here as a name since we are deploying the same resource. Okay. Then the SKU, similar way. Then we can hit that command to deploy that resource. So let's see what happens. Now we'll see that this has successfully deployed and we have passed in the values for the parameters as key value pairs. So this will take us to the final way of passing key value pairs, which will be by using parameter files. Before I demo that, I would like us to change the storage account name and its SKU from a string type to an object type parameter. This will further enhance the template. First, let's define a new parameter, and that will be an object. Let's call that storage account config. Under this object, we'll have the strings, the name, and the SKU. So how do we do that? Uh, let's rename this to storage. So let's change this to the config dot name. Okay, then this will be the same config. Okay, this time around is the SKU. Okay, so then we can get rid of this one since we're not using this anymore. Okay, we can use a parameter file to pass the value of parameters defined within a template. For this, we can quickly use the Bicep extension to generate parameter file for the template storage account Bicep. We right click this, select generate
parameter file, we're required to choose if it's JSON or bicep param file format. I'll choose the bicep parameter file format. We have the option to select all the parameters defined within the templates or the required ones without the default values. So I'll just choose the all. Okay, this gives us opportunity to delete whichever we don't want after carefully reviewing it. Looking at the generated parameter file, we'll see the keyword using identifies the template which we generated this from, and we also have the parameters that were all defined within this template also shown here. So we know we don't need the location parameter since we already defined it in the template, so we can remove this one. Okay, then for the storage account config, we will define its name and the SKU values. So let's enter that name. What will be the name? We can go to our initial template and pick the name. Okay, just paste here. Then we'll define the value of the SKU, which again I will just copy over from here. So what we have now is the object storage account config, and we have the individual elements or properties that makes up the storage account, which will just be the string, name, and SKU. So we have now passed this as an object and have defined the values for the parameters. So what do we do next? We can test our deployment. Let's notice that the command to use here is a little bit different. So here the command to use here will now point to the parameter file, unlike the previous one where we are defining it in the inline using key value pairs. So let's see how this goes. So we have seen the three ways of assigning values of parameters. We can have an in-place value as default value. We can as well pass in key value pairs. And lastly, we can use the parameter file to define all the values of the parameters.
In this session, we discuss what parameters are and how they are used to improve templates to be more reusable and dynamic. We discussed the types of data types, including string, integral, boolean, array, and object with practical examples. We also looked at how to pass parameter values using default values provided in like key value pairs during deployment and using parameter file. In the next session, we will introduce decorators in Azure Bicep. You will learn how to use decorators to enforce constraints, secure sensitive data, and further optimize our templates for real life scenarios. Stay tuned.